In 2022, a call was made by a woman named Sheila Fletcher claiming her daughter Lacey Fletcher had passed away while her and her husband were out for the weekend. And in no time, the police and ambulance arrived at their place, and what they saw might be the most horrific thing ever. Lacey Fletcher, who was 36, was found half naked and fused to the couch in her own feces, urine, and maggots. She also weighed only 96 pounds. Her body was completely melted into the couch. Doctors claimed she was sitting on the couch for 12 consecutive years without moving at all. Lacey was a very cheerful person until 9th grade when she decided to be homeschooled. She had multiple mental illnesses including autism, Asperger's, and social anxiety. She also had locked-in syndrome, a condition when the entire person's body is paralyzed except for their eye muscles. Her parents neglected her condition and let her rot to death. She was kept starved and ate sofa foam as bite marks were found on the couch, and they found sofa foam in her stomach during the autopsy. This is the couch Lacey was on for 12 years straight, and the most shocking part is that her parents would sit on their own recliner, which was just a few feet away from the couch, meaning her parents were accustomed to the condition, atmosphere, and the bad odor. Her parents also claimed Lacey chose to never leave the couch, but how could she? Her parents were sentenced to 20 years in prison for this awful and disturbing crime.
Do you guys remember the Randonautica app and how it led a group of teenagers using it to a suitcase of dismembered human remains? On June 19th, 2020, a group of teenagers were using Randonautica, which prompted them to explore a West Seattle beach called Duwamish Head. One of the teens was recording a TikTok video when they stumbled upon a large suitcase that had washed ashore. After opening it with sticks, they found the inside of the suitcase was a garbage bag that had a horrible smell, so they called the police. When police searched the area, they also found a smaller duffel bag, and both bags contained dismembered human remains. After testing, the King County Medical Examiner found that the remains belonged to 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and 27-year-old Austin Winter, a couple who had been dating for 8 years. Authorities concluded that the couple had been beaten before death, and after Jessica was shot multiple times while Austin was fatally shot once. They were then dismembered, and police believe this happened roughly 10 days earlier on June 9th. During the investigation, authorities found that the couple had been renting a room in a Burien house from 62-year-old Michael Lee Dudley, who had a long history of sexual assault and violent animal cruelty. On the night of the murders, neighbors actually called 911 after hearing gunfire and screaming coming from the home, but when the Burien police responded, nobody answered the door, so they just left. A witness came forward and said that she actually moved into Michael's home on the night of the murders and that Michael actually helped move her things in. But she said that his glasses were broken and that he had scratches all over him. She also said that later that night, she opened the upstairs bedroom door, which is where she was going to be staying, and saw a pile of clothing on the floor with a hand sticking out of it. Michael then reportedly told her that he needed to clean up a mess first and asked if he could take her somewhere else for the night, in which she agreed. But when they were leaving, she saw Michael laying out plastic tarp all over the basement floor. And when she asked him about it, he said, quote, "Let's just put it this way, his gun misfired and mine didn't," end quote. After searching Michael's home and finding bullet holes, blood, and other incriminating evidence, he was arrested. Although he initially denied any involvement in the murders, authorities believe that his motive was over unpaid rent. Michael was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, and I believe sometime this month he will officially be sentenced.
This is the disgusting cage that a woman kept her son captive in until a chance encounter saved his life. There was a horrifying discovery made this year in a New York property that potentially saved the life of a 2-year-old boy. 24-year-old Naisha Lumpkin was living in Buffalo, New York, when a search warrant was executed on her home. This took place on the 8th of February. Now, the warrant was actually relating to an unrelated charge, but it's an absolute miracle that this happened. Police showed up, and thank God they found what they did. The woman's 2-year-old son was living in this makeshift cage. He had no room to stand up and barely any room to move. The tiny cage was made out of a playpen that was covered by a piece of crib tied down on 3 sides to the top. Inside was rubbish, animal bones, and human feces. Heartbreakingly, the child was said to have been covered in his own feces and urine and had bruises all over his body. His mother is alleged to have given excuses as to why she had, in inverted commas, to keep the child in the cage. Obviously, officers noted that there was absolutely no way that there was any excuse for the child to be kept in such deplorable conditions. Child Protective Services were called and the child was transported to a children's hospital. He was actually found to have 2 fractured ribs. Now, these were healing, which indicated that the injuries happened around 2 weeks prior. The mother was arrested on child endangerment charges. She is scheduled to appear in court next month.
You ever heard of La Mano Peluda? Yeah. For the people that don't know, pretty sure like our Mexican supporters, they know what La Mano Peluda is. For the ones who don't know, it's a radio show. People will call and tell their creepy, scary stories. There's this one case about a caller. His name is Josue, and he was claiming that he's being taunted by like malevolent spirits, demons, and stuff like that. When he was young, his family went through like an economic crisis. So like there was broke, there was late on bills, and he was trying to find ways to get money. He eventually came across a book that was in Hebrew, basically taught you how to summon Satan and how to do witchcraft.
Oh hell no.
He starts to practice it. Nothing really changed after that until his second encounter. He said his second encounter was with a pig that talked. They go to this cave. They're in this cave for 21 days. And then when those 21 days are up, they give him a ring, and it's the ring of Solomon. So with that ring, he could literally summon any demon that he wants.
If he wants money, this demon. If he wants this.
Yes. But in order for him to do that, he would have to sacrifice a family member.
Dije, mi madre, pues no la quiero mucho. Mis hermanos, pues no, porque por eso lo estoy haciendo. Y pensé en mi abuela. Le dije, sí, ella está grande, ya vivió, ya.
Stabbed her to death. But he said that when they found her, she had like no like cuts or anything like that.
Like she had a heart attack?
Yeah, like natural cause, bro.
What the fuck?
Time passes, and first thing that happens to him, he gets into a college or a university, and he finishes it in 6 months, which takes 8 years to accomplish. Starts his own company, and starts getting paid $15,000 a day. There's also a catch to it too. What the fuck?
Bill Clinton allegedly sexually assaulted this woman in 1978, so let's talk about it. This is Juanita Broderick. She is a big critic, a very outspoken woman who has stood up against Bill Clinton, and she has a very, very disturbing story to share. In fact, she has written an entire book about this encounter titled, "You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, How I Survived Being Raped by Bill Clinton." So in the year 1974, Juanita bought a nursing home. She had gone to nursing school and she wanted to operate her own nursing home. And it was in the year 1978 when Bill Clinton visited her nursing home for his 1978 gubernatorial campaign. So according to Juanita, she stated that she wanted to volunteer for the campaign. She got contact information from Bill Clinton, who was the Attorney General at the time. And she was then invited to visit the campaign office in Little Rock, Arkansas. She contacted the campaign office again a few weeks later when she was in Little Rock, and allegedly they told her that he wasn't in the office that day, but Bill Clinton could meet her at a coffee shop. According to Juanita, though, when Bill met her at the coffee shop, he stated that they should have coffee in her room instead of the lobby to avoid crowds of reporters and people. And she agreed, and they went up to her room. And it was apparently in this hotel room where this disturbing act unfolded. So according to Juanita, she and Bill talked for a little bit. He mentioned how he wanted to renovate a prison that they could see from the hotel room window, and then the unspeakable happened. According to Juanita, Bill tried to come kiss her, and she expressly stated that she wasn't interested because she was married, but Bill was unrelenting. Allegedly, she begged him to stop, but he pressed on. He kissed her and started biting her lip, shoved her onto the bed, and just kept biting on her lower lip as hard as he could. And when everything was said and done, he got up, straightened himself up. She was crying on the bed, and then he looked at her and said, "You better get some ice on that," before walking out the door. Now, you could easily just say that Juanita was making all of this up, but at the time she was actually sharing her hotel room with her friend and fellow employee named Norma Rogers. When Norma returned to the hotel room, she stated that she found Juanita in a state of shock. Her pantyhose was ripped at the crotch, and her lip was swollen as if she had been hit or bitten. She also stated that Juanita immediately told her about what happened. So at the end of the day, this allegation was never actually fully proven to have really happened, but this is not the only allegation that has ever been made about Bill Clinton. And I'm not even talking about all the Epstein stuff that's coming out right now. But if you want me to talk more about this stuff, let me know and I'll make a part 2 in this series.
So this is about some kid named Aiden Fucci. He was a 14-year-old. On May 9th, he murdered a 13-year-old girl. Her name is Tristan Bailey. Tristan Bailey's parents reported her missing, right? The whole community, bro.
They went out to search for her?
So they put posters. Their dogs were searching for her, bro. They were looking at their Ring cameras, everybody was in it together, bro. And then literally 16 hours later, a jogger was just jogging his regular trail, and he ended up taking a wrong turn somewhere, and he saw a little girl next to a bush, and then boom, that was the first thing, right? Out of nowhere, somebody reports that they see something on their Ring camera, and they see him walking with a girl, and then you see them walking into the forest. The way he murdered her was he stabbed her 115 times.
Oh my gosh, bro.
2 hours passed, 3 hours passed, and like you see a kid running like mad fast, like sprinting across like the street, and then another one he's walking until the cameras of their house, and he goes inside, and he was reported wearing blue jeans. They see the camera footage, right, and they're like, I bet, let's get this. They go to his house, they put him inside the cop car.
Having fun in a cop car.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Tristan, if you walk out the damn, it's in a cop car, cuz.
And then they put him into jail, and they're holding him for a minute, right, until more evidence comes out, bro. Inside their house there was cameras. So inside their house, you could see the camera footage of the mom literally like scrubbing the fucking jeans, washing the jeans, bro, and then she hangs them up and stuff. The cops go, they find DNA of the girl inside the fucking sink and on the fucking jeans, bro.
9-year-old was brutally murdered, and no one knew who'd done it until police found the neighbour's secret diary. It was a dark evening on the 21st of October 2009. Patty Priest lived in St. Martins in Missouri, and her daughter Elizabeth Alton had gone out that evening. She had literally just gone to pop to see her friend, so Patty was concerned when she failed to return home. She rang police to alert them of the missing 9-year-old. What transpired is like something out of a horror film. Police immediately started searching for the missing girl. They scoured the local area for any clues to her whereabouts. They would soon make a horrific discovery behind the neighbour's house. The 9-year-old had been buried in a shallow grave. Her autopsy revealed she had died a horrific death. She'd been strangled, stabbed, and had her throat slit. No one had any idea of who would be capable of such an abhorrent crime. Then they questioned the girl who lived at the house where Elizabeth's body was discovered. This was 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante. Officers seized her journal, in which they found a chilling confession. It read, "I just effing killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the mo. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Hey, I gotta go to church now, lol." Her social media was also incredibly dark. She had references to bad decisions making great stories, and her hobbies were listed as cutting. She was arrested and taken in for questioning along with her grandma. When the teen confessed to the brutal murder, her nan ran outside in tears. Alyssa had lured Elizabeth to the nearby forest to hang out. She then ambushed her and launched the brutal attack. Alyssa would go on to plead guilty to second-degree murder and was given life in prison.
This mom hunted down cartel members for killing her daughter. This is Miriam Rodriguez, and she hunted down 10 cartel members for killing her daughter. On a fateful day in 2012, Karen Rodriguez, who was Miriam's daughter, was driving her truck when suddenly 2 trucks encircled her. 2 men then came at her with guns and dragged her from the car and into theirs. Later, the 2 men took her to the Rodriguez family home and tied her up. They were about to proceed with their ransom plan when a family member dropped by and witnessed the scene. At this point, the kidnappers decided to abduct both Karen and the family friend. After the kidnappings, Karen's family started receiving threats and ransom demands. Miriam and her family had no choice but to take out a loan from the bank to pay for their daughter's ransom. This was because there were so many ransoms in the city that the bank was giving out ransom loans. Miriam and her husband were then told to drop the ransom off at a local medical facility. They waited and waited, but nobody showed up. Miriam then demanded to meet with the gang members, and they agreed. The meeting took place at a local restaurant. She met with a man who tried to demand more money from her without saying where her daughter was. Miriam was then asked for an extra $2,500. The family continued to wait, but Karen never returned. Miriam knew at this point that her daughter Karen would not be returning. The heartbroken mother then vowed to find every single one of her daughter's kidnappers. The family friend who was also kidnapped was let go shortly after it happened because he offered no value. Miriam then pressed him for the physical appearance of the gang members, and he did. This was enough to confirm the man she met with, who was named Sama, was involved in her daughter's disappearance. Maryam then spent hours searching on Karen's social medias looking for any clues about her kidnapping. Maryam then came across a picture of Sama with a girl at an ice cream shop 2 hours away, so she decided to go there. She then located the store and began stalking it regularly. She then recognized the woman from the picture with Sama and studied her work hours, patiently waiting for Sama to show up. Finally, when she spotted Sama coming to the store, Maryam waited to follow the couple home and get their address. Maryam then had to get closer to these people, so she went undercover. She cut her hair and dyed it red and put on an old government uniform. She then went door to door in Sama's neighborhood doing fake surveys. She then spent some more time identifying and locating more gang members from Sama's crew. And before you know it, Maryam located a picture of Sama with a group of his fellow gang members. On September 15, 2014, Maryam's son was closing his shop when he noticed a familiar face. It was Sama. He then immediately called his mother. Sama was then arrested and quickly gave the names of the people involved in Karen's abduction. And finally, they got word of Karen's location. The gang members said, "I'm willing to take you to the ranch where they killed and buried them." When they went to the ranch, they found Karen's scarf, her car cushion, and her femur bone, confirming her death. Maryam continued to try and find her daughter's killers, though. Maryam traced a member named Flores back to his hometown and discovered he attended church. So Maryam started attending mass and stalking the church. Eventually, she contacted the authorities over her findings and Flores was arrested. But Maryam isn't done there. After receiving a tip, Maryam located a man selling sunglasses near the Mexican-United States border. The man immediately recognized her and began to run away, but Maryam came prepared. She ran after him and tackled him to the ground and pointed a gun at him. Maryam then detained him for about an hour until police arrived. But after hearing about what Maryam was doing, cartels began to threaten her, which made her seek help from the Mexican government, and she requested special protection. During an incident, some prisoners were able to escape the jail where her daughter's kidnappers were being held. And on May 17, 2017, Maryam was found dead outside her home. On May 10, 2017, which is Mexico's Mother's Day, Maryam was shot with 13 bullets by the same prisoners who escaped. In her quest to seek justice, Maryam became a symbol of courage and resistance against the criminal underworld. This goes to show the love a mother has for their kids. Maryam was going against a very powerful cartel, and in my opinion, beat them in more ways than they beat her. Rest in peace to Maryam, you will never be forgotten.
There's a really strange missing persons case happening right now that everyone should be talking about. This is Dia Abrams. She mysteriously disappeared from her 117-acre California ranch in 2020, and the details surrounding her disappearance are odd. Dia was last seen on June 6, 2020 at around 2:30 p.m. by her boyfriend Keith Harper. The two had been living together since 2016. According to Keith, the two had lunch together at her Bonavista Vista ranch house in Mountain Center, where she told him that she needed to talk to him about something. But the two were reportedly supposed to go on a trip to Colorado the next day, and the property needed worked on, so he pushed the conversation off. He then spent the next several hours mowing the meadow, and during that time, Keith said he received an ominous text from Dia saying, quote, "You cannot save me from all things," end quote. Keith said he then returned to the ranch house at around 7:30 p.m. and Dia was gone. All of her personal belongings, including her Ford F-350, her phone, her purse, and her dog Ruby, were all left behind. Keith said the entire time he was outside on the ranch, he had a clear view of the front gate, and he didn't see anyone enter or leave. He then said that he spent the rest of the night searching for Dia, but when he couldn't find her, he reported her missing the next day to Riverside Police. The very next day, about 26 of Dia's neighbors, friends, and family came out and spent the entire day searching for her on the Bonavista Vista property, but there was no trace of Dia. Her friends recall Keith sobbing that day, saying, quote, "I'll never see her again." It would take the police a few days to come out and search the property, but suspiciously, Keith would leave before they could arrive. According to him, he spent the next week attending business meetings in Arizona and New Mexico, traveling in his RV. He apparently owns property in Arizona and a storage unit business in New Mexico. And like I said, this was all before police could search Dia's property or his RV. Keith claimed to be in contact with the police the entire time, but they actually had to track him down at his storage unit. They were able to search both the RV and the unit and ended up removing a section of the front driver's seat as evidence, as well as a list of evidence from his storage unit that hasn't been made public. Now, Dia's son reportedly learned of his mom's disappearance from her neighbors, not from Keith, the day she was reported missing. And when he went to the Bonavista Vista ranch to search for his mom, he said that her bedroom door looked like it was smashed in from the outside. He also discussed discovered a handwritten note from Dia saying that she was scared for her life. When police officially did come out and search the property, they also found 2 shell casings on the front porch and drops of blood on a sheet in Dia's bedroom. But Keith has explanations for both of those findings. He says that the blood on the sheet is likely from a rare skin condition that he has that makes him bleed easily, and the shell casings on the front porch were probably from him shooting at a coyote. Dia was seen on her neighbor's Ring doorbell video about 5 hours before she disappeared. It was around 9 in the morning, and she was bringing her neighbor a batch of freshly made cinnamon rolls. Her neighbor reportedly had cancer and was going through chemo, and they had mentioned that they really wanted cinnamon rolls, so Dia made them for her. After this, she vanished. Multiple searches have taken place, including the Bonavista Ranch and one of her other properties called the Sky High Ranch. At the moment, it's not clear if the third property that she owns has been searched, but it's now been 4 years, and Dia is still missing. The timeline of her disappearance is based entirely on Keith's statements, since he was the only one present at the time she went missing, and police have named him a person of interest as a result, although he denies any involvement. During the investigation, police learned that just 2 weeks before Dia went missing, she made changes to her trust, naming Keith as a co-trustee of her estate, which also included her 2 other properties. And up until January of this year, Keith continued living on her ranch and even turned it into a short-term rental property, which was really suspicious to Dia's friends and family. You'd think that with her being actively missing, you wouldn't just let random people on the property. But in late 2023, a judge removed Keith as the co-trustee after he tried to list the ranch for sale. He reportedly contacted a listing agent and said that he owned the ranch for 16 years and wanted it listed for $5.2 million. And after learning that he improperly removed some of Dia's personal belongings from the property, a judge ordered him to vacate the ranch, which he did in January of this year. He's not allowed to return either. A new court-appointed co-trustee now has access to Dia's estate and has since listed 2 of her properties for sale, including the one that has possibly not yet been searched. The Bonavista Ranch hasn't yet been listed, but it is expected to be soon. According to authorities, if Dia isn't found by June of 2025, half of her estate will go to her children, while the other half will still go to Keith. Those closest to Dia feels that Keith has more to do with her disappearance than he's letting on, and that's because of his past criminal history. He was previously convicted of 2 counts of unlawful sexual contact, and in 2002, he pleaded guilty to third-degree assault against his ex-wife. With the bizarre circumstances surrounding Dia's disappearance, her family thinks that she was definitely met with foul play. Her son believes that she was kidnapped, murdered at another location, and then had her body disposed of somewhere. According to them, Dia would never leave her ranch or her animals behind. She even refused to leave her property a few years back when there was a massive fire surrounding 3 sides of her land. It's now been 4 years, and whatever happened to Dia remains a mystery. If you have any information regarding her disappearance, please contact the number on the screen.
This island has one of the most disturbing histories in America, and no one really knows the full truth behind it. So like I said before, this island was owned by multi-millionaire Francis Sheldon, pictured right here. And Francis and a number of other local men from Michigan, including this guy, Gerald S. Richards, ran a boys' camp on the island. They would fly kids to the island on this airstrip, kids from the YMCA and other schools and communities in the area. And both the children and the parents of the children who attended this boys' camp were told that this was an island of fun where kids could relax. They had big brothers there. It was going to be totally safe. And this camp ran on this island for a period of years. Then one day, some of the kids who attended the camp began to tell their parents that the counselors or the teachers, the adults that were there on the island, had behaved with them in very, very inappropriate ways. They began telling their friends and parents that they were taken into these cabins pictured here on the island. They were assaulted. They were told to remove all of their clothing and that there were cameras all over the place. Well, it turns out that this guy, the multi-millionaire with political and business connections in the area, Francis Sheldon, was running a massive CP ring. And they had been abusing the children on this island under the guise of bringing them to a boys' camp for years, recording all of it, selling it across the world. And some of the more affluent clients of their business were even allowed to take trips to the island themselves to see some of these young boys. Now, this story bears an obvious resemblance to the story of Jeffrey Epstein, but there are some very, very strange things that are happening here that nobody knows about, and the government still refuses to talk about to this day. So let's talk about this guy, Gerald S. Richards. He was a gym teacher at a local Catholic school who went down for the crimes, and he was heavily involved with every aspect of this business, if you know what I mean. Well, it seems like through his political and business connections, Francis Sheldon was actually tipped off that he was about to be arrested and raided and charged with these horrific crimes. So Francis, before he could be brought to justice for these crimes, he actually fled the country in a personal plane. He then moved to France, got remarried, and died in Amsterdam, and never had to pay for any of the crimes that were committed here. But it's when we start talking about the murders that this story really starts to blow my mind. So take a good look at this guy, Chris Bush. This is Christopher Bush's father, Harold Lee Bush. Now, he was an executive with General Motors, and the family was obviously extremely wealthy. They were politically connected, and they were very connected to every business in the area. These guys had a lot of power. But back to Christopher Bush. This guy had assaulted a number of children. He'd been let out of prison, let out of jail in a very, very suspicious way multiple times, put on bail for serious offenses. And he was an alleged associate of the crime ring that was happening on North Fox Island. Meaning that, like I said earlier, he was one of those people who could afford to actually fly out to the island to do things himself. I'm out of time. Follow for part 3. This is where it gets juicy.
So this is the Taiwanese elevator case, right? It starts off with the manager, like the building manager. He's closing up everything. It's dark. There's nobody in the offices no more. And I don't know what, he sees a lady come inside, right? She has her daughter. She's carrying her daughter. Her daughter's like 4. She's like 37 years old. She runs past the manager and he's like, hey, like, what the f, where are you going? What the f are you doing? She just continues, opens the elevator, and she's like, oh, I'm just looking for a friend. And he's kind of confused, but he like felt like a weird ass feeling like something was wrong. She never ended up coming down, bro.
Don't tell me.
So he looked at the camera, and then the footage that he saw on the camera.
Oh, you have the actual footage?
So you see her, she gets out of the elevator, but the weird part is, why the f did she take off her jacket, her daughter's jacket, and then she took off her sandals, and then she walks out of the elevator, and specifically the 11th floor, and where she's heading over is the fucking staircase, right? But that staircase is specifically either to go down or to go into the roof, and then from there they're never seen ever again. The next day, he's like, what the fuck happened? He automatically thinks like, yo, jumped off. It's probably he calls the cops. The cops expect that they're gonna have to do like a cleanup. So the cleanup crew comes. They look all around the perimeter. Nothing, bro. They watched every single second of footage, bro. They didn't leave the building at all.
So what the
Their last option is to check the building itself. They go around looking at every single crevice, every single room, every single hidden room, water pipes, water tanks. They check everything, bro.
They couldn't find her?
And still to this day,
They can't find them?
they have never found both of them.
It sounds like some backrooms type thing.
Bro, that's what the fuck I thought of.
Really?
Not specifically the backrooms, but
just that
they went to a different reality. And the other theory is that,
When a man was put in prison for killing his mum, his family should have been safe. Then another member of the family was brutally murdered, but this time by someone else. Just a warning here, this case is absolutely sickening. In 2013, the dismembered body of Tanya Bird was discovered in suitcases in the Bronx. Now, if you haven't already watched my first video on this case, I advise you to go back, watch that video, and then come back to this one. Tanya's son, Basid, was pictured here holding her dismembered head. He was later convicted of her murder and jailed for 25 years to life. However, that was far from the end of the tragedies of this family. While Basid was in prison, another family member was about to be murdered again, but by another family member. Now, as I said in my previous video about this, convicted murderer Basid had a son when he went to jail. This was Zamir Coombs. He was a sweet little boy, aged just 4 in 2017. While his dad was in prison for killing his own mother, Zamir was in custody of his mum, 28-year-old Zara Coombs. She was dating somebody else at this point. She was no longer with Basid. In January 2017, Zara was at home with her little boy when he asked for something to eat. She refused to give him any food, so he took matters into his own hands and went over to the fridge to grab an egg. He then accidentally dropped the egg on the floor. She reportedly became so enraged that she beat him to death with a broomstick. The little boy didn't stand a chance. She then callously put his body in a storage container and carried on with her daily chores, like feeding her little baby. When Zara's boyfriend returned about 20 minutes later, he found the absolutely horrifying scene. He was confronted by the realization that his girlfriend had just murdered her own child. He rang police, they raced to the scene and rushed the little boy to hospital, but it was tragically too late. Shockingly, she was only given 17 years in prison after pleading guilty to manslaughter and endangerment of a child.
We hear a lot about what Jeffrey Epstein has done, but who was he? Let's take a look at his past. Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. He came from a working class family. His father worked for the New York City Parks and Recreation Department, and his mom was a stay-at-home mom. And everybody who knew Jeffrey Epstein when he was younger only has good things to say about him. They said he was a sweet guy, he was quiet and nerdy, and he even was given the nickname Epi as a child. Jeffrey also started playing the piano at the age of 5, and he was regarded as being a very talented musician. He eventually graduated high school in 1969 and then went on to university, but he never finished his degree. Now this is where it gets interesting. So in the year 1974, Jeffrey Epstein starts teaching physics and mathematics at a local school. The headmaster of the school was known for hiring random people, and it's unclear how Jeffrey Epstein got hired, but he wasn't qualified to be teaching there. And according to former students who had him as a teacher, he paid extremely close attention to the young female students. Obviously, all these girls were minors at the time that he was teaching, since this was high school, but he was also known to show up at parties where minors were drinking and hang out with them. But eventually, through his teaching job, Jeffrey Epstein was introduced to this man, Alan Greenberg. Alan Greenberg was the CEO of the investment bank Bear Stearns, and his son and daughter attended the school that Jeffrey Epstein was teaching at. And eventually, once it was found out that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't qualified for the job and his performance was poor, he was fired, and he then was recruited by Alan to join Bear Stearns. Now, this is where Jeffrey Epstein moves into the financial world and starts making a lot of money. He eventually worked his way up the ladder at Bear Stearns, but was eventually let go because of a violation with his work. He then founded his own investment company, and this is where things get really strange. Jeffrey told friends at the time that he oftentimes worked for governments to help them recover embezzled funds, and he would also work for people who had embezzled funds. He also told some of his friends at the time that he worked as an intelligence agent. One fact that could point out that this might have been true is that Jeffrey Epstein had possession of an Australian passport with his photo on it but a different name. His place of residence was also listed as being Saudi Arabia. This relates back to one of the later cases in Jeffrey Epstein's life when a U.S. district attorney stated that they were initially told to leave Jeffrey Epstein's case alone because he was considered to be a part of intelligence. There are a lot of connections that do point to Jeffrey Epstein possibly being some sort of intelligence agent, but if you want me to cover some of those, I can make a whole different TikTok. Eventually, though, Jeffrey Epstein was this rich bachelor living in New York City. You can even look at one of these ads that was taking out about Jeffrey Epstein looking for a woman. This is a very eerie ad considering what he went on to do with his life. And if you want me to talk more about Jeffrey Epstein's life, let me know in the comments below. Make it part 2.
This is the site of the 2011 Zanesville, Ohio animal massacre, and if there's ever a story that needs a trigger warning, it's this one. This is Terry Thompson. He was a Vietnam War veteran and an exotic animal collector. He owned a 73-acre farm near Zanesville, Ohio, and turned it into a private zoo called the Muskingum County Animal Farm, where he kept many exotic animals throughout the property. On October 18th, 2011, shortly before 5 p.m., Terry set 50 of his animals loose into the town of Zanesville and then fatally shot himself in the head. His body would then be partially eaten by his own animals. As sunset was approaching, multiple 911 calls started pouring in about dangerous wild animals roaming around the countryside, and what followed would turn out to be a deadly massacre.
911. Is this a hoax or is there truly? No, it's true. And if you see anything, stay indoors.
Remain indoors. Don't try to approach them.
They're on the interstate. Two more African lions. One is wounded roaming the property.
It's complete chaos out there. We've got officers going in heavily armed, and now it's all snowballed into hell.
While the animals were on the loose, people were urged to stay indoors, and all of the schools in the area were canceled. Police were then faced with the unthinkable, and they ended up fatally shooting 48 animals before they could terrorize the town. Luckily, no humans were attacked, but the scene was something straight out of a nightmare. Police killed 18 Bengal tigers, 17 lions, 6 black bears, 3 cougars, 2 grizzly bears, 2 wolves, and a baboon that were roaming the town. According to one police officer, he said the scene was so gruesome and the smell alone made him unable to sleep for 2 weeks. A responding officer also said that the animals were exhibiting aggressive behavior, and at times it was almost a hand-to-hand combat with them. The bodies of the deceased animals were all lined up the next morning and were then put into a bucket loader to be buried on Terry's farm. What's crazy is that you can still view the photos of the crime scene online, although I don't recommend it. They are incredibly graphic. While the animals were being loaded up, a handful of people came along and tried to steal a lion's dead body, but thankfully they were caught and arrested for that. Authorities also discovered 6 animals animals that were alive in cages in Terry's home. They found 3 leopards, a small grizzly bear, and 2 monkeys. Those animals were tranquilized and taken to the Columbus Zoo. 1 monkey was never found, and it was assumed to have been eaten by another animal, but according to experts on the scene, it was highly likely to have carried the herpes B virus. So the fact that it was never found is a little scary. Many people think that this situation could have been prevented. Terry was reported multiple times before his death for unsafe housing for the animals, and he also didn't provide them with sufficient food and water. His animals would often escape his poorly fenced yard and cause damage to the neighbor's property. Along with that, he was also cited in the past for animal abuse and neglect, but in 2011, at least in Ohio, it wasn't illegal to own exotic animals. But following this massacre, Ohio's exotic animal laws took full effect in 2014. As for why Terry might have done this, leading up to the incident, he was in extreme debt. He had just separated from his wife, and he was also facing house arrest after a year in prison for a gun conviction. So it seems like he might have just snapped. There's a whole documentary about this called Horror at the Zoo, and it's an insane watch.
This 13-year-old boy survived one of the most brutal Mexican cartel attacks ever. A Mexican-American Mormon family was traveling to their relative's wedding in 3 separate cars when they were suddenly ambushed by a fleet of cartel hitmen, but amidst the violence and chaos, one name emerged as a beacon of hope: Devin Langford, the 13-year-old boy who survived one of the cartel's most brutal attacks. On November 14, 2019, members of the LeBaron extended family were traveling to their hometown Lamora to attend a wedding, but this just wasn't a celebration. It gave an opportunity for the LeBaron family to reunite with their loved ones who lived across the border. However, they never made it to their destination. At 9:40 a.m. that day, the first vehicle carrying Ronita Miller LeBaron and her 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and 8-month-old twin children were attacked by a group of armed cartel members. Her car bursted into flames and nobody in the car survived. Then, around noon that same day, the second car, driven by Donna Ray Langford, was carrying 9 children, and another car with Christina Langford Johnson and her infant daughter was attacked as well. Christina sadly didn't make it, but luckily her baby daughter managed to survive. It was said before her death, Christina jumped out of the car with her hands up, indicating she wasn't a threat, while begging for her and her daughter's life, but the cartel didn't care. They killed her anyway. Donna Ray Langford and 2 of her children lost their lives, while her 13-year-old son, Devin Langford, managed to make it out alive with his other siblings. Devin tried his best to shield his siblings from the violence that was happening right before their eyes. But what was most heartbreaking was all the kids that made it out alive were injured during the ambush. These cartel members literally jumped out of nowhere and began firing their weapons at defenseless women and children. Devin was the only person who wasn't injured, and what he did next was absolutely heroic and traumatizing. Devin hid his siblings behind bushes and walked 14 miles back to the family home. It took him 6 hours to get back to the family ranch for help. The family then quickly contacted the authorities to search for their family members who were viciously attacked. Just imagine being a parent and seeing your child run home saying his mother was dead and his siblings were all injured. When the authorities located the attacked vehicle, the scene was absolutely devastating. The LeBaron family broke down at the horrific aftermath.
This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt.
Ronita Miller LeBaron's car was burnt to a crisp. They could only imagine the inhumane things inflicted on their loved ones. The surviving children were located and quickly transported to a hospital in Arizona. The ones who were not injured were escorted back to their parents. This was such a devastating situation, the Mexican army had to get involved. The only highlight of this whole situation was finding Christine Marie's 7-month-old baby in the car. Sadly, her mother lost her life, who she will never get to know. What was supposed to be a fun, joyous occasion turned into a tragedy. Instead of gathering to celebrate, they had to plan family members' funerals instead. Devin Langford was called a hero for his actions, but in reality, he was a scarred child. He had to witness brutality that took his mother's life. He had to witness his brother and mother's funeral at just 13. No child on this planet should ever have to witness this kind of violence and cruelty. Rest in peace to all the LeBaron family members who lost their lives. This is an absolutely tragic event.
However, according to the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
These are creepy things you never knew existed. Okay, so every single one of us would love to go and visit Japan. But if you do, whatever you do, never stay at these hotels in Japan. There are these hotels in Japan that cost only $1 a night to stay in. But there's a disturbing twist. These hotels live stream every single one of your movements to complete random people and strangers. So every single second you're spending in these rooms, you will be live streamed to thousands of people, just watching your every movement for no reason at all. They can watch you eat, sleep, bite your nails, or just anything else that you do. But the scariest part about this whole thing is that your identity, your face, and your location is now known by thousands of random strangers. So unless you're a person that likes going to random countries and having your location and identity known by every single person, this might be the place for you to stay. But let's be honest, I don't think anybody wants that. But I know there's some people with a budget that would just get over all of that and pay the dollar. But in my opinion, this is just weird and just kind of disturbing. These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know if a nuclear war ever happened, the two big dogs in it would be Russia versus the United States. And the video I'm about to show you is a super realistic simulation of an all-out nuclear war between Russia and the United States. This is absolutely terrifying, and just imagine all of these nukes going off at once. Because this is what would happen.
This British father of four did the unthinkable on Facebook Live. So this is Paul David Hilton. He was 34 years old, and on April 30th of 2022, he started a live stream on his personal Facebook account. Now, to everybody that knew Paul, he seemed like one of the happiest people around. And when Paul started his live stream that evening, multiple friends and family members joined in. According to one friend named Lewis, he thought that Paul would be telling jokes or doing something amusing. He even said he thought the live stream would be funny. But the events that unfolded in Paul's home pictured above that evening would be far from funny. And in fact, when people joined in, they noticed that Paul had extremely slurred speech and he didn't seem like himself. It was when people really realized what Paul was about to do though, when they started calling the police and authorities, but it was too late. On that live stream, Paul took his own life by hanging and broadcast it in front of all of his friends and family that were watching. Now, after investigation was done, Paul's blood alcohol level was found to be 2.5 times the normal limit, and they also found cocaine in his system. Those extremely close to Paul knew that he had struggled with mental health issues in the past, and that even recently, the year before, he had been referred to an addiction counseling center. But it seems like his struggles with drug abuse and mental health really got the best of Paul when he decided to live stream his own unaliving on that evening.
Tonopah has now been ranked among the most haunted hotels in the country.
3 minors set out to rob the bank one day, and 1 minor shot the other 2, leaving their bodies in the vault.
In one of the corner rooms on the 5th floor is where he started to strangle her.
According to Tracy, if you pull back the carpeting in that very spot, you can still see her bloodstains in the wood flooring.
The Mitzpah Hotel is believed by many to be home of several ghostly figures.
In this episode, we're investigating 2 of the most haunted places in Nevada, the Clown Motel and the Mizpah.
Oh! Hotel! Oh, oh!
2 people murdered in here.
Yeah, and they are said to be down here. Our number 1 lady of the night, Miss Rose, over here.
Evelyn.
No! The lady in red's name is Evelyn!
Lots of people have died here.
You want me to turn my light on red? Right when I hit red, dude. Oh, what the was that?
Are you the spirit of the killer?
You scared? Who is the evil man?
Man evil.
Why do you like to scratch people though? Are you afraid of people getting too close to the truth?
7 pit bulls ripped this man's face off, killing him, and it's absolutely brutal. This 46-year-old man named Aglacer Pereira was going for his morning walk one day when he was suddenly attacked and brutally killed by dogs. He was ambushed by 7 pit bulls and had his face completely ripped off. They escaped from a farm and attacked the first thing they saw, which was Aglacer. A brave passerby rescued him from the gruesome attack and called an ambulance. They then helped the victim down the road to meet the emergency vehicle. Aglacer was rushed to the Santa Cruz Hospital in central Pinho, over 20 miles away from the area where the incident took place. The pit bulls had completely bitten off all the skin on his face, leaving his skull completely exposed. The only way I could really describe how his face looked is if you poured red paint all over a white skull and let it dry. He had no eyes, no lips, no nose, no facial features at all. It was just skull and blood and some skin left over and some tissue. I really don't recommend looking up the photo because it will make you lose sleep. It's absolutely disturbing. But after Aglacer arrived at the hospital, he tragically succumbed to his injuries. Can you just imagine enjoying your daily walk and you see 7 pit bulls running towards you? I know I would be absolutely terrified. I feel so bad for Aglacer, and may he rest in peace. This is absolutely brutal. This might be the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. Octavio da Silva was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil, and on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began a fight with the referee. Abreu threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Abreu. Abreu died on the way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Abreu's family and friends, found out about his death, they invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him, and then ripping his limbs from his body with just their strength and no weapons, and then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field. And what makes this worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely disturbing, and I don't recommend looking them up. The way his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because it wasn't cut off properly and it was just ripped off. This case is absolutely awful, but why did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir Abreu to death, he would still be alive today. But just imagine being literally ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
These are the heartbreaking final texts of a victim from the Pulse nightclub shooting. Pulse was one of the biggest nightclubs in Orlando, Florida. On the evening of the 11th of June 2016, they were hosting a Latin night. Pulse was a gay nightclub and they regularly had drag queens performing for the crowds. Around 2 a.m. of the morning of the 12th of June, an attack began. Suddenly, a man opened fire on around 300 people that were inside the venue. Initially, there was confusion and some people thought that it was firecrackers or part of the music. At 2:09, the club posted on Facebook, "Everyone get out of Pulse and keep running." The gunman had exchanged fire with a policeman at the door who was working that night. Now, Imran Yusuf, who was a veteran working as a bouncer, recognised the sound of gunfire. He jumped over a locked door where behind people were hiding in fear. He opened a latched door behind them, allowing around 70 people to escape. His quick thinking undoubtedly saved many lives. Police raced to the scene and a battle began inside which forced the gunman back. Terrifyingly, he took several hostage in the toilets at the back of the building. He warned police that he had explosives. During this time, terrified partygoers text loved ones to try and get help. 30-year-old accountant Eddie Justice sent these heartbreaking texts to his mum. At 2:45 a.m, the gunman, identified as Omar Mateen, called News 13 of Orlando. He announced that he was the shooter and he stated his reasons for doing so. Hostage negotiators were called in and police decided to storm the building at around 5 a.m. Dozens of people who had been cowering in another bathroom managed to flee before the gunman emerged. Another gunfight ensued between the gunman and police until they finally shot him dead. 49 people died and 58 were injured. At the time, it was the worst mass shooting in modern US history until 2017 when the Las Vegas shooting occurred. This is the last picture of this woman alive. Minutes later, her husband did the unthinkable. Butterfly Valley in Muğla, Turkey is an incredibly popular beauty spot. In June 2018, Hakan Aysal was visiting the spot with his wife, 32-year-old Semra. The pair were expecting a child soon as Semra was 7 months pregnant. The cliff was actually 1,000 feet up and many tourists are enticed there with the lure of the beautiful views. However, little did she know, Semra had been lured there for an entirely different reason. Semra was actually afraid of heights, but Hakan convinced her that the trip to the cliff would pay off. Prior to the pair going on the holiday, Hakan had actually taken out life insurance for his wife. On the day in question, he lured her to the edge of the cliff to take a selfie. They'd actually been up there around 3 hours, and Hakan had been waiting for the exact time to strike when nobody was watching. After taking the photo, he callously shoved his pregnant wife off the edge of the cliff, causing her to plummet to her death. A witness driving past was then flagged down by Hakan, who he described as completely calm. The man later stated, "I was driving there and I saw someone was waving at me and I stopped." Hakan came and said that his wife had fallen down the cliff. He said, "We immediately got out of the car and started looking for her, but we couldn't see where she would have landed from where we were." He then said, "We tried to get closer to the edge for a better look. Hakan did not come with us down there. He was not acting like a man whose wife had just fallen off a cliff." Photos of the couple were shared on the news and a tourist came forward to say that they had actually seen the pair too. They had noted that it was odd that the pair was scrambling down a very rocky area to get to the very edge. The pair were even captured on video by a tourist who had joked, "Either this man will throw the woman off or the woman will throw the man." Suspicions were raised further when Hakan tried to claim an insurance payout shortly after his wife's death. Hakan tried to claim insanity, but he was ordered to serve at least 30 years behind bars before he can appeal for release. This is the moment right before this woman was fatally shot live on TV. Allison Parker was a budding young journalist from Martinsville, Virginia. She graduated from James Madison University and in 2014 she started working on air. This was for the morning show of WDBJ7. It was early in the morning of the 26th of August 2015 when Allison and her cameraman, 27-year-old Adam Ward, were preparing for a broadcast. Allison had actually just celebrated her 24th birthday and she was getting back into the swing of work. The pair were due to cover the 50th anniversary of the Smith Mountain Lake. In the middle of a live interview though, something horrific would take place. It was around 6:45 a.m. and during the live broadcast a man in black approached. Terrifyingly, he was carrying a gun. Suddenly, he fired at Allison and he then turned the weapon onto Adam. He fired shots at the woman that was being interviewed called Vicky Gardner. She actually thought quickly and played dead on the floor. Terrifyingly, the camera was still rolling and broadcasting to the horrified viewers at home as Allison and Adam lay dead. The gunman then fled the scene. The cameras were cut by the control room and the live feed cut back to the stunned journalists in the studio. They understandably could not process what had just happened. Police raced to the scene and Vicky was rushed to hospital and thankfully survived her gunshot wound. The other journalists at the news station thankfully actually recognised who the gunman was. They told police the shooter was Vesta Flanagan. He'd actually previously worked for the news station until he was sacked for making staff feel uncomfortable. He had a history of being sacked from jobs due to bizarre behaviour and threatening people. It transpired that Vesta had planned out his shooting in detail. He tweeted a confession shortly after and posted a video of the shooting to his Facebook. Police were obviously desperate to track him down, but before they could do so, he crashed his car and unalived himself.
What are some Google searches that have led to people's arrests? Today we're going to talk about the dentist who was just arrested for putting poison in his wife's protein shakes. I cover all sorts of spooky and true crime stuff on this page, so follow along for more. On March 6, Angela Craig went to the hospital for dizziness and severe headaches. She would eventually pass away as her symptoms got worse. But what we know now is that her husband, James Craig, was slipping both arsenic and cyanide into her protein shakes. And part of the reason we know this is because of what James was looking up on his work computer weeks before his wife's death. Searches like how to make poison, undetectable poisons, and 5 undetectable poisons that show no sign of foul play, as if there was a fun listicle about it. And the shocking part of all of this is allegedly not the first time that James had tried to poison his wife. He allegedly poisoned her 5 or 6 years ago and she found out. And it's now believed that he was doing all this so that he could run away with another woman.
This model was murdered in Croydon and what her killer said in court will make your blood boil. Sally Ann Bowman was born in 1987 in Carshalton in South London. She had 3 sisters and was very talented and attended the Brit School for Performing Arts and Technology in Croydon. As you can see, she was very beautiful and she had dreams of becoming a professional model. After leaving school, she worked as a part-time hairdresser and tried to make it as a model. In 2005, she joined Pulse Model Agency. She actually became the face of Swatch watches. Her career was going from strength to strength and it looked like all her dreams were about to come true. That was until the 24th of September 2005. Sally was 18 at this point and was starting to go on nights out. On the night in question, she was out with her sister and a group of friends. They went to Lloyd's Bar in Croydon and stayed there until around 1 a.m. Now, CCTV captured her leaving the bar and she waited around 15 minutes outside for a taxi. She then contacted her ex-boyfriend, Lewis Sproston, who offered to pick her up. The pair initially broke up due to accusations of them both cheating. However, that night, Lewis picked her up from Croydon Town Centre around 2:20 a.m. He drove her to her house in Beinheim Crescent. Unfortunately, in their car, they got into another argument about the cheating rumours, and Lewis actually sped off at around 4 a.m. as Sally got out of the car. Shortly after this, neighbours reportedly heard screaming but didn't actually go outside to see what was going on. Sally Ann lay outside having been stabbed in the neck and stomach. She was AR'd as she lay dead or dying. Her belongings were stolen, including her cardie, her bag and her phone. She was found deceased next to her home and police initially thought that Lewis was to blame. He was arrested and held for 4 days until finally DNA evidence eliminated him as a suspect. It wasn't until 9 months later this man was arrested. This was 35-year-old Croydon man Mark Dixie. Police had luckily managed to swab Mark 2 weeks earlier for having been involved in a brawl in a pub where he worked as a chef. The DNA they collected matched the DNA on Sally Ann. In court, Mark would admit to R-ing her after finding her on the ground outside her house. He denied murdering her though. Infuriatingly, he said he did not realise she was dead or dying when he found her. He was found guilty and sentenced to a minimum of 34 years. Frustratingly, it was actually then revealed that Mark was already a convicted serial S offender. He'd obviously been free to kill Sally Ann. He's unlikely to be considered for parole until at least 2040 when he's around 70.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Murdered along with her 2-year-old daughter and buried under the kitchen floor. 25-year-old Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter Jellica moved from the Philippines in 2019 to the UK in search of a better life. 2 years later, they were dead. In February 2021, during lockdown in the UK, 52-year-old Andrew Innes is said to have targeted Benny Lynn through a dating website. He'd driven down to Bristol, picked up Benny Lynn and her daughter, and driven them back to his home in Dundee. They were reported missing 2 weeks later as family couldn't get in touch with them, and police saw Andrew's car on CCTV driving down to Bristol and back to Dundee the same day, and they tracked his car back to his home. At first, Andrew said that he'd driven down to Bristol, picked them up, and then driven them to Glasgow where he'd dropped them off with another man, but after further questioning, he admitted the murders and told police, "They're under my kitchen floor." Benny Lynn was found 4 feet under Andrew's kitchen floor, wrapped in plastic and a blanket, and her daughter's naked body was found next to her. Benny Lynn had been hit repeatedly over the head with a hammer and stabbed with a samurai sword. And 2-year-old Jellica had been raped, smothered and strangled to death. It later came to light that Jellica had been murdered 3 days after her mother. Shockingly, there was also a 7-year-old girl found in Andrew's house. She was sat in the living room watching cartoons on TV. She hasn't been named for legal reasons. She was able to tell police that Andrew had killed Benny Lynn with a hammer, and she also said that she'd been playing hide and seek with Jellica when Andrew closed the bathroom door and killed Jellica. She'd been in that house with Andrew for 2 weeks and was subjected to horrific sexual assaults and rape. Police said that if they'd arrived just 24 hours later, she could have been Andrew's 3rd murder victim. Her brave testimony was key in Andrew's trial. The trial took place in February 2023 and Andrew denied murder, claiming diminished responsibility. It took the jury just 2.5 hours to reach a guilty verdict for the murder of Benny Lynn, the rape and murder of Jellica, and the rape and abuse of the 7-year-old girl. Passing sentence, Lord Beckett said that this was one of the worst crimes that's come before the High Court of Edinburgh. He sentenced Andrew to life with a minimum of 36 years, meaning he'll likely die in prison as he won't be eligible for parole until the age of 88. Andrew is currently planning to appeal his sentence.
Can you tell a place has a dark history just from looking at it? In this series, I'm showing you some photos so you can see, and I cover all sorts of spooky and true crime stuff on this page to follow along. This is the Wisconsin home of Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield. There's actually very few photos of this house that are in any way appropriate to share because of the nature of his crimes. It was in this house that Ed taught himself taxidermy after his mother passed away, and it was the local cemetery where he would go to rob graves and practice what he had learned. This is the room that Ed's mother lived in, and after she passed away, he had it completely sealed off and never touched it. This is in part why the movie Psycho was based on Ed Gein. Ed's mother would tell him all these crazy things, like that women were all guilty of lust and they were just sent to tempt men, which is why many people think that he specifically hated women. And you might be thinking that these photos were taken years after he was out of the house, maybe it had been abandoned for a while, but no, these are the conditions that Ed would live in. When robbing graves wasn't enough for Ed, he moved on to taking people's lives. And to this day, no one's definitively sure how many lives he took. But there's a real darkness to these photos, and if you're brave enough to look up the other ones online, you can see how disturbed the person living there actually was.
Bludgeoned with a hammer and strangled to death while she was making a cup of tea. Holly Carroll was murdered by her husband, who then calmly sat and drank a cup of tea and made lunch for their 3 children while she lay dead on the kitchen floor. Chris and Holly were separated after a volatile marriage, but Chris still visited regularly to see their 3 children. Holly was described by her mum and sisters as a bubbly mum of 3 who was loved by everybody who met her. She lit up every room she walked into, and she was devoted to her 3 children and a vital part of the small community that she lived in Wales. But to her controlling and manipulative husband, she was nothing more than someone he could coerce and bully. On Sunday, April 22nd, 2018, Holly messaged her sister, saying, "He's here now, so I might not be able to message, as yesterday he twisted my arms backwards and nearly ran me over to get my phone." Seconds later, she messaged again to say, "He's just got into the shed and got a hammer." Her sister urged her to call the police, but it was too late. Chris launched a violent and frenzied attack on Holly. He hit her to the side of the head with the hammer, and as she fell to the ground, he then got on top of her and strangled her until she stopped moving. He then calmly sat and drank the cup of tea that she'd just made for herself, cleaned up the blood, and then wrapped Holly in plastic and their son's Thomas the Tank Engine bedsheets. He then placed Holly in the boot of the car and then made lunch for their 3 children. After they'd finished lunch, he put them in the car too and drove to his mother's farm, where he used a tractor to bury Holly's body. He then stopped at a petrol station where he saw a police community support officer, and he asked if he could report his wife missing as she'd left him that same day. He then started covering his tracks and started contacting Holly's friends and family to say that she'd left him and taken her clothes with her. He even went as far as setting up a Facebook page for Missing Holly. At first, police absolutely bought his story. He seemed like a concerned husband, not someone who'd just committed a murder. He even joined in with the search party. However, a witness came forward the next day to say that they'd seen Chris in an area of remote farmland climbing over a fence, and when asked what he was doing, he said that he was burying his dead dog. Police searched the area and found Holly's body buried in a shallow grave. She died from blunt force trauma to the head and pressure to the neck. The tip of one of her fingers had also been amputated. Chris was arrested on April 27th and admitted the murder. During his trial, Holly's mother said to him, "You took my soulmate and carved out my heart. You've changed the axis on which my world turned, and I'll never accept what you did." Chris pleaded guilty, and on November 2nd, 2018, he was given life with a minimum of 25 years.
This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig, and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad, Robert, and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 p.m. and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.